Go ahead.
So tonight we have Don Rosenberger with us. He started taking pictures in the mid to late 70s as a teenager, developed his own black and white film, really enjoyed photography, but never quite found the calling. Then when he got to his mid 20s, expensive photography got to be too much, stopped taking pictures. Then he got into digital photography for his day job and started wondering if it was actually something to get back into. Then he purchased a camera, started doing all sorts of kind of stuff, went out and started joining some clubs and found a passion. And now he's actually doing things like international tour manager for Kelly Schneider. So tonight he's going to help us out. He loves working with photographers and plans to continue doing this via his meetup group and workshops. So tonight we have Don Rosenberger.
Welcome, Don.
Okay, thanks. So let's see. Somebody want to put me in control?
Yep. Boy, I haven't done this in a really long time.
You're going to make me the host, I believe.
Yeah, I got it. There you go.
All right, let's see. Share screen. Okay. All right, just can everybody see my full screen? Yep. Okay. All right, cool. Okay. Thanks, everybody. As John briefly mentioned, I do have my own meetup group. It's called the Fairfax and DC Area Photography Meetup. I know a lot of you guys are already in it, but feel free to take a look. And let's see about me. Retired from Roadrunner. I used to be presentation manager for Nature Visions. My claim to fame is Art Wolf almost called me God on stage. It was a funny moment, but he really wasn't calling me God. He was asking a question, and if you were there, it was pretty funny. And then I love to light paint, and we all have to start somewhere, and this is where I started light painting. And you know, back then I thought, oh wow, this is really great. I had this picture on my early website, and anyway, whoops. And then so Bruce Dale here, who is a retired National Geographic photographer, I emailed him about a question about one of his pictures, and he was kind enough to not only reply, but to take a look at my website and say, you're doing it all wrong. And he sent me this picture here, and he said, this is how you light paint. You know, it should look like a painting. He said, you know, the picture that I just showed you guys, he goes, it looks like a flash went off. He goes, it's just not how you do it. And I was, rather than be offended, I was, you know, just really grateful, because I really lacked a mentor for this type of thing. I had just seen some work that other people had done, and I thought, hey, this is my calling, you know, this is me. So, and I got to thank him about a year or two later when I met him after he gave a talk. And of course, he didn't remember me or sending me the email, but but I still appreciated it nonetheless. Another influence is Dave Black. He has a website, and he does like Instagram live chats or whatever, but he's a sports photographer, but light painting is his thing. And you know, so of course, reading the stuff on his website, seeing his Kelby, it's not Kelby TV, it's whatever Scott Kelby's thing is these days. It's changed names a couple times. But anyway, he's got some videos on Kelby. I guess Kelby One is what it's called, I think. But anyway, he's got some videos there where he shows you how he light paints and everything. And then of course, this guy, you know, and you can see this is an older picture. It's 2009, but this guy just blew me away. I was like, oh my God, it's just, you know, the detail on this is amazing. You know, it's like the light stand on the right side of the screen's got light on one side of it. I mean, if you just really study like where the light is on the bicycle, where it is on the gas pumps, the Coca-Cola signs. And what I found out with Eric Curry is that he will take hundreds of pictures of exposures. For something like this, he's probably got 300 exposures that he's working with to blend into a finished product in Photoshop. I don't go that detailed. Whereas Dave Black, on the other hand, tries to get everything in one shot in camera. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you couldn't do this in one shot. It's just too complex. The lighting's too intricate. And for my own, and I'll show you lots of examples, I try to find a happy medium between the one shot and 20 or 30 shots or so. And then, of course, there's Harold Ross, who is probably the most recent person I've come across that does light painting. And Harold's up in Pennsylvania, and he's been doing this sort of work for, I'm gonna say, at least 30 years. So he's obviously really good at it. And he teaches workshops at his house. And I briefly considered one of his, it's a Friday night, all day Saturday, and then part of a day Sunday workshop, but it's almost $2,000. And by the time I was kind of where I am with my own light painting, I was just like, I'll probably pick up one little tip, and it's like, yeah, and so I'm being a cheapskate and I'm not going to Harold's workshop. But if you're starting from zero, it's probably an incredible experience. But anyway, and he's got lots of examples on his work on the web. So before you get into that, you need a little bit of basics. So, you focus, and when I say focusing at night, that's not still life like Harold's saying. That's you're out on the landscape, you're taking a picture of an old truck or something. Well, if it's just you can throw light on the subject, or you can use a green laser. A green laser is an amazing device for focusing at night. Your camera will literally lock on to that little dot all the way on the other side of a lake. It is amazing how well a green laser works for focusing at night. Just got to make sure you're not pointing it up in the air at airplanes, or pointing it at other people, that sort of thing. And then exposure at night. If you go by your meter, your meter may look at the scene and go, okay, you should be X number of seconds at F8 or whatever, but your meter's trying to give you literally what's called 18% gray exposure. And that's way too bright for night. So you have to have a comfort with shooting manually and just in figuring out your own exposure. And for me, it's just kind of intuitive. I usually start about 3 stops underexposed, and then I'm adding light to the scene with my various lights. So existing night photography, if you're out and about, well, obviously, it's good to go there during the daytime first. You don't want to, go someplace you're unfamiliar with, especially after dark. Think about your safety too. Is it a safe area? Is it good? Should you be there with somebody else? Does somebody else know where you're going? There's all that sort of stuff. Not everybody likes a tripod, but with this type of photography, it's not optional. The difficult thing I have is keeping my camera level. When I set up my camera, it's just probably, I don't know, my vision's a little off or whatever. I guess screw loose, something where I tend to tilt about 1.5 degrees to the left. And if I bring up the level on my camera menu, sure enough, the camera's tilting a little to the left. So I'm always double checking my level when I'm working anything at night, or even, a landscape during the day for that matter. I'm checking that level. A timer or a cable release is helpful because you're not touching the camera, you're not inducing vibration into it. Now, if you've got a really super solid tripod and a good head, maybe you're going to be okay and that'll work. But the average $300 travel tripod or whatever is just not that rock solid. And if you're taking multiple exposures of the same thing, as you change the lighting, you're going to probably move the camera slightly. Okay, white balance, you could lock it in at like 5,000 Kelvin, which is daylight white balance, or I leave it on auto and I deal with it in camera raw. So it's up to you. Either works, just whatever you're comfortable with. Low ISO is always best because, you're adding light and you need time because, to light a subject, it may, if it's a little tabletop subject or a big car or something, you know, you're going to probably need anywhere from a couple seconds to, you know, several seconds to move the light around your subject the way you want. In-camera noise reduction, I would tell you to turn it off because you're shooting at a low ISO. Any camera that's been made in the last 5-6 years, noise with a few second exposure, even a 15-second exposure to low ISO just should not be an issue. It was when I started doing this, you know, 10 plus years ago. You know, my old Nikon D70, yeah, it got a little noisy on a 20-second exposure. But and then of course I say tripods in the police because, you know, we live right outside, you know, Washington DC, and there's a lot of places downtown that, you know, which of course are great subjects to photograph. However, when you bring a tripod, you look like a professional photographer, and professional photographers are required to have permits. And so you may have an officer want to inquire what you're doing, whether you have a permit, that sort of thing. And then there's some places where they're just not going to let you in with a tripod. Like, you know, up in the Lincoln Memorial in the evening, I've been refused access a couple times where it's like, you can come in, but you're not bringing that tripod in here. You know, and it's like, seriously? But of course you go at, you know, 6 in the morning for sunrise and nobody's there to say a word. Okay, so histograms. This is, I guess, technically a good exposure. What you care about with a histogram is that you're not losing all the detail in your blacks, which you can pull some of that detail up. And again, the newer sensors are amazing at pulling the detail out of the blacks. It used to be, you know, 10 years ago, if it was way into the blacks or way into the whites, that was gone. You weren't getting it back. Now, or you would get it out of the blacks, but it would be so noisy, it wouldn't be useful. Well, now, of course, again, cameras are much better, and you can recover a lot of detail without a lot of noise out of the blacks on any kind of camera that's made in the last few years. And but what you want to watch for while doing this at night is you just don't, most of your data is going to be over on the left side of the screen. And you just, so I don't really use I use the histogram for like daylight, landscape, all that stuff. I don't use it for this because what I care about is more is the LCD. What does it look like on the LCD? Is my subject bright enough? I figure if I can see it on the back of the camera while I'm shooting, I've got enough. But anyway, so histogram, it's going to be, everything's going to be slid over to the left when you shoot at night if you do look at your histogram. So now, of course, this is just, this is HDR, believe it or not. Now, why HDR? You know, HDR is known for being those super crunchy, over-processed looking fake images. Doesn't have to be. But I've got a shot here at the Pentagon Memorial, and the water in the little pool there below each bench obviously is just the brightest bright you can imagine. And other parts of it are just in total darkness. And to try to get all that in one picture, well, it's beyond the dynamic range of, you know, most cameras. So I shot a bracketed series, combined them, but I wanted a realistic exposure. Now, I used to use Nik HDR effects. Then up until a couple of years ago, I was using Aurora from, was it Skylum? You know, now I just use Lightroom because I want a naturally looking HDR. So if I do bracket a series of images, I combine them in Lightroom. It gives me a very natural looking exposure. If I want to make it a little crunchier, I can do that with some other effects. But I just don't do the, you know, the big HDR programs anymore. Not that if you're doing them, great, and if you're happy, it's just kind of where I've evolved to. Anyway, again, just another exposure. Now I'm shooting f/22 at this because you see all the lights along the edge of the Baltimore Harbor. You've got the nice little, you know, starburst. Well, that's just from stepping, you know, your aperture all the way down to, you know, f/22. It's a several second exposure because you can see how the smoke is kind of moving. And it's just a simple, so it's one shot, it's a simple setup. But you know, so you can do some great stuff after night, just because, or after dark, just because, you know, the sun's gone down doesn't mean you have to put your camera away. Power plant up in West Virginia, Mount Storm, just taken, you know, on the other side of the lake. And you know, it's probably, I don't know, 15-30 second exposure, something like that, enough to get the trails from what's coming out of the smokestacks, and super simple to shoot. So, or here, it's before I had a lightning trigger. I was up at Longwood Gardens. I'm letting the camera handle the exposure for the foreground, and then I'm just holding the shutter open, you know, a few seconds at a time, and I'm just hitting it repeatedly so that eventually I caught some lightning. It was a thrill. I don't really think it's such an artistic piece. I don't really have much detail on the ground. It looks like these little luminescent things are floating. You know, obviously you've got a tree line in the back, but you know, when it's your first lightning picture, it's pretty exciting. So anyway, but if you get serious about lightning photography, get a lightning trigger, make your life easier and less frustrating. Now, of course, you can use flash after dark. It's an option. In this case, I put a flash inside the car to illuminate the inside. I hit the right side of the car with a flash, and also at the same time, I had like 3 flashes, all controlled, you know, through the, you know, the Nikon thing, where Nikon basically says, you do this, and they all talk to each other. Really easy on the photographer's part. The thing is, it looks like it was dark here, but it wasn't. It was probably 15 minutes after the sun went down. It's still fairly bright outside, but because you're throwing all that light on the car and inside the car, well, then the camera exposes for that. And so then now all of a sudden the ridge line goes dark, the tree goes dark. You know, it's, I don't do flash for this type of photography very often, but it's an option. And, you know, now if you're going to do it, get that flash off the camera. There's just nothing flattering about having a flash mounted in your hot shoe and that light coming straight at the person on the same, I guess, line or axis or whatever is the lens. Gels can kind of help jazz things up a bit. Grids or snoots can narrow the beam so you can be more selective about what's being lit. You know, remote triggers, I forget why I even threw that in there. I mean, I guess it's that thing about, you know, again, if you're pushing your camera, you could be inducing a little movement into it, and just, you know, have fun. It's about creativity. You know, there's, you know, it's a fun thing to do. This was my first trip up to the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, which I'll talk more about later. But the way I constructed this photo, it's one exposure. I put a gelled flash in each room. I set the camera up so that it was what's called rear curtain sync. So when just before the curtain closes, so it's like a 20-second exposure, just before that shutter closes, it fires the flash. So for the first 19 seconds or whatever of that exposure, I'm standing outside these doors, kind of throwing a little light around the door frame. So that's the white light around the 2 doors that are open. And then I drag the little light stick in kind of an S fashion into the room on the right. And then I go, you know, still 20 seconds hasn't elapsed. So I just wait inside, and boom, the flash is firing, and this is what I got. So it's, you know, it's not that hard to do. You know, these days the flashes do a lot of the calculation and stuff for you. You just put it on, you know, TTL, which stands for through the lens metering, and you know, the flashes are pretty amazing. But anyway, now another thing are these things called balls of light you can do. It's it used to be that you would just buy these Christmas tree lights from eBay. Let's see, I'll show you a picture. Okay, this little strand of battery operated Christmas tree lights, and they come 20 on a strand, and you put 10 of them in a bunch, and then you know, the other 10 you tape up or whatever. And then you spin them. Now, when I go back, if you look at the inside of the ball, you'll see a little bit of light inside the ball, like a smaller circle in a circle. Well, that's all those 10 lights that I had taped up that weren't quite 100% sealed. So a little light was escaping from those. And anyway, this for me was kind of a fad. I've got an actually really nice one these days that there's a guy named Dennis Smith in Australia that makes, and he has a website if you want to check out. I think it's called Ball of Light. But if you just Google Dennis Smith Ball of Light photography, I'm sure you'll find him. Or if you can't find him, drop me an email and I'll send you a link to his page. But anyway, he does beautiful work with this stuff. It's the Ball of Light is his passion, and he makes a really neat tool for doing it. But anyway, if you want to experiment with this before you spend $200 for his tool, you can buy, one of those things on eBay. Now you can get different color LEDs. They're battery powered. They're fragile. I've had them break on the first ball. Literally, you're spinning your first ball of light with it, and the speaker wire, or not the speaker wire, but the little wire between the LEDs breaks. So then what I started doing was I would cut a section out between the head with all the light and the little battery pack and use speaker wire, which was much heavier. Well, the speaker wire is also much more friction. So, as you're spinning it with your wrist, that thing, if you guys see me in the picture, that wire is just rubbing right where it's resting in your hand. And of course, it'll take the skin right off. So you want to wear a nice pair of gloves or work gloves or something to protect your hands. Anyway, that's just a close-up of what all the LEDs look like bunched together. Here's one. I shot this at a place called DuPont Underground. It's under an old subway line under DuPont Circle. And it's about 5 different exposures. There's there's one for each ball. The one ball, and then the wider ball that wraps around it. And then, of course, I used a gelled light out in the front of the tunnel for one exposure. And then I went down further down the other tunnel with another one, and then another one. So there's five different exposures that, that make that up. I'm not sure that it's any, when I look, it was a lot of fun. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't hang this on my wall these days, but it was a lot of fun doing. Another take, just same thing, just doing a single ball of light down in each tunnel. And Woolies. That's your past president, Jeff Johnson, up there on the stand. And anyway, these are kind of a lot of fun. I preferred, this is okay shot. This is Carrie Furnace up in Pittsburgh. Here's Jeff's setup, by the way. And anyway, you stuff the steel wool in the whisk, attached to like something like a dog leash or whatever to spin it. The little fire extinguisher there isn't for the steel wool. You're not going to put that out. When metal starts to burn, it burns completely. The steel wool's, the fire extinguisher is for anything that the steel wool happens to catch on fire. And of course, you notice he's got some goggles and some gloves, and you'll probably still get burned a little bit in the process because that little pieces of steel wool that are on fire go flying off. But you can set fine steel wool on fire with like a 9-volt battery across it or a lighter. It's amazing how easy that stuff starts to burn. So if you're going to do this type of thing, eye and body protection, metal burns completely. It's going to burn until it stops burning. And always outside in a non-flammable environment. And because like you said, you do it indoors, you're liable to set wherever you are on fire. Here's a quick little video of Jeff doing it out on the beach in Cape May. And you'll see him do it. And then I'll show you what the actual exposure looked like. It's not that exciting watching him do it, but it's pretty cool when you see the combined image. All right, so that's Jeff. And that's what it looks like. And then here's the finished product. So anyway, I just never kind of taken to that hole in the middle and the silhouette standing there. Even here, he's up there. This again, back at Cary Furnace. This is where I found it a little more to my taste. Jeff was down below on that structure. People were photographing him. I went upstairs and made that just part of the composition rather than the single focal point of the composition. So it's all in what you like, lots of options, and nobody gets hurt. We're all just having a good time. So my way of light painting is not the only way of light painting. It's just the way that I like to do it. And, that may or may not be for you. Years ago, I ran across this gentleman online, and he uses a Star Wars lightsaber, recreation, and he drags it through different scenes and makes like a ribbon. And you can see this is just like a little urban scene that he drags it through. And that's pretty cool. And there's this thing called the pixel stick where it's, about 3 feet long, and it's got LEDs in it, and you move it and it'll change. And so it's like, in this case, it's like, virtual graffiti or a rainbow. So that's an option if that's your type of thing. And this is a guy, I haven't seen him online lately. I mean, maybe he's still out there, I don't know. But the only thing real in this picture is the umbrella in the tree trunk. He's using this stuff called L-wire, which is just fiber optic cable with a colored, LED at the end of it. And it's about 20 feet long, and you just whip it around like a wet noodle. And that's what all this gold is in the bottom. And then I think he's using the pixel stick to come in toward the tree. And, all of Jeremy's work, is just very kind of, for lack of a better word, flamboyant, loud, it's his style or whatever. So anyway, as long as, he's having fun and enjoying what he's doing, it's all good. It's not, like I said, it's not my cup of tea, but if this resonates with you, I'd encourage you to, get a pixel stick and run with it. All right. So light painting. Now, a lot of people have asked me over the years, oh, why don't you do a thing for our camera club? And the problem is, this is just with one other person light painting old cars with me. And believe it or not, there's an old car right in front of me that I want to shoot, but he's got all this stuff going on 50 feet away. And so it's kind of difficult to light paint with other people in a small environment. When I say small environment, this place we were at had like 20 cars. So we really couldn't spread out far enough to where we were out of each other's way. Or in this case, I was getting ready to do my light painting thing, and my buddy that was with me down at DuPont Circle sticks his camera lens into the scene. And, and of course I didn't know it. I had set my camera up. You can see a little bit of blue behind the post in the center. Well, that's me sticking out because I'm getting ready to do my light painting. And, and this is before Photoshop had the content aware. So I never went back to try to fix this or to try to, to get rid of that. I mean, today I could probably fix that, but at the time I was just so irritated that, I never did anything with the shot. But the idea was going to be one tunnel was going to be naturally lit with the light, and the other one was going to be light painted. But again, that's just with a couple of your buddies, doing it. And then of course, the other thing is when you've got everybody lined up, there you go, everybody ready? And everybody, yeah, we're ready. And then you start to do it, somebody yells, I'm not ready. So anyway, so light painting is a solitary endeavor. It can get you almost arrested. I was down at Duncan Trucking several years ago, and we had permission to be there after dark. However, the owner's sister, which lived on the adjoining property, did not know that we had permission to be there after dark. And she thought that the aliens were landing or something with all these lights going on in the woods, and called the police on us. And we got detained for about a half an hour until they sorted all that out. So anyway, just a few fun stories. So when you start getting heavy into light painting, you start collecting flashlights. This is my collection of lights 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, something like that. I've got twice that many now. And, you know, each one has its purpose. So a few more lights, you know, the LED, little LED panel, big LED panel, and the ice light. Okay. Then if you really want to get technical, you can start modifying the light. You can use grids. You can use, there's this black foil I have called black wrap, which is like aluminum foil, but it's like twice the thickness of it. And it's coated in black. So you can wrap it around light. You can make snoots with it. You can do all kinds of things. And I'll show you a little later these PVC elbows, which are absolutely awesome for doing close-up work. It's a Harold Ross invention. I showed you he had that little still life with the bearings and the gears and stuff. He's the one that invented these little PVC elbows. They're just made with little plastic PVC pipe that you can get at a hardware store. But I'll talk more about that later. All right, so technique. You know, this is the one thing I've kind of been, it wasn't intentional that I was leaving it out of the presentation in the past. It's kind of one of those things. I knew it and understood it, and I just didn't think to convey it very well, I guess. But there's a technique to light painting, and that technique is to paint the light, not point the light. So if you're standing 30 feet away from your subject, you are not painting the light, you're pointing the light, okay? Or if you've got a little tabletop thing and you're standing behind your camera, you're pointing the light. To paint the light means getting the light in close to the subject. And yes, that means that your light could be in the shot. Well, you don't point the light at the camera. You have it masked in such a way, whether it's using some black tape around, like if you got an LED panel, it might have some like little breather holes on the back or something. You got to cover those up so light doesn't bleed back toward the camera. So anyway, but you want to get in there. Sometimes it means getting your whole body in the scene. But if you keep moving, the other thing is you don't want to just stand in one position. You want to move the light and potentially move you. Now, you still may get some ghosting where you can see like traces of where you were. If you're doing the technique I'll talk about later, where you're combining your images, it's not a problem. You shoot it from all different angles and you'll get what you need lit, you'll get what you need not lit. But anyway, you want to get the light close, and when you think you're close, you're probably not. Get it closer. The other thing is angle the light for more texture. It's the same thing, you know, that pop-up flash on your camera is the most unflattering flash you could possibly use. Move the flash 5 feet up to the side, whatever, and all of a sudden that light is so much more flattering. It's the same thing with this. It's just if you're just standing behind the camera pointing the light, it's just going to be flat. It's not going to be that interesting. Moving the light off to the side a little bit will give you much more texture. So we all have to start somewhere. This is another one of my early pictures. I was so proud of this one. It graced the cover of or the front page of my website many, many years ago. And today if it were not, you know, me swallowing a little bit of my ego and pride, I wouldn't even want to show it to you guys, because it's just, you know, to me, I look at it now and I'm like, wow, it's not that exciting. It looks literally like a flash went off on this dead tree. It was just a dead tree up on Skyline Drive at one of the pull-offs. And of course, I look at it now, well, there's no sense of place. You know, you've obviously got this little city down below, but like, where's the tree in relation to the city? You know, it's just, but again, we all have to start somewhere. Over time, you know, you put, you know, effort into this, and you will, you know, you will grow and you will learn. Okay, so doing single exposure light painting, like I said, Dave Black does. Well, the pros are it's easy and you don't have to worry about doing a lot of work in Photoshop. However, you may take 20 pictures of something to get the one image that you really wanted, because you may have some areas that are too bright, or you may have some areas that are too dark, or you didn't get the light really where you wanted it, or you missed a little spot or whatever. So I gravitate away from that. However, there are times where you can do a single exposure and it works just fine. This is a house that I rented one night on my way to the Smokies, little cabin about halfway down, and got up for sunrise. And of course, the right side of the house, that right wall plus that bedroom extension that's coming off in the back, well, that's dark because the porch light's not wrapping around there. The sun's coming up in the other direction. So I just used a light to just throw a little light on that side of the house, just so it just didn't go all dark, just to kind of balance the exposure. Didn't have to be fancy. Now here's an old caboose I would love to do again. This is all one shot. I'm running around like a madman trying to throw light on everything. And again, at the time, I really felt like I had something. Today, oh my God, I would light paint each wheel individually, the axle, the hitch, each rail. I mean, this thing would be 100 different shots put together. And I think it would just have a much better feel to it. But again, when you're running around just trying to get it all right in one shot, you get what you get. And sometimes it's adequate and other times maybe not. A small, simple scene like this is, there's that little school or the little church up there next to Gilbert's Corner, just off of Route 50. And there's a little graveyard out back. And of course, this is a little headstone that the tree's wrapped around. That's a little simple exposure. I mean, yes, you can, something like that, maybe in one shot works fine. But I think the more complex things don't lend themselves to that. Two things about the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. I was down there one night with a buddy and many, many years ago. And of course, somebody had to point out to me when I first posted the picture online that the Washington Monument was leaning to the left. Because remember, I told you when I set up my camera, I'm always about 1.5 degrees left. So anyway, I straightened that. The one thing that I don't, and all I had was, I didn't expect to light paint that night. All I had was a little tiny flashlight in my camera bag. And so I used it just to throw a little light on the flags, except the second flag in, the smaller one, you can see where I moved the light away and then I moved it back in. And I wish, maybe I could kind of, burn that out now, but it was a mistake. But it was just, again, I come back at it later and I go, I like the concept, but I don't, I think I fell a little short on the execution. But it's, the little details matter, just because it's a new technique or not a technique that everybody does, you still have to deliver, I think, really good results if it's going to be a good picture. And, like I have a problem with that one little errant streak of light. In other words, there should be more diagonal light or horizontal light across the walkway to give it texture and depth, or none at all. So anyway, okay, back to the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, and you'll see several things from here, and I'm just throw out, if anybody doesn't have anything to do this weekend, you can come join me there. Sam's coming, and just there's going to be a total of 10 people, which is actually a nice small group. Normally we have about 20 plus people there for this, but this year a lot of people didn't sign up. And anyway, and we can spread out so far. I mean, the place is huge. It is literally, I don't know how many tens of thousands of square feet the place is. So, social distancing is easy. But anyway, they've got a sign up on their website if anybody wants to do it, or you can, ping me afterwards or whatever, and I'll, fill you in with the details. But anyway, in this case, one of my early light paintings, so to speak, that green coming in from the outside light, all I did was just take a light and kind of wrap around the reflection of the light, or, the projection of the light from outside to just kind of, so it wasn't just all black with just that. So sometimes it's just about balancing an exposure. Or in this case, I've got that green light for whatever reason coming in outside. And yet, so then I took a green gel, put it over my light, and just drew an outline around the drywall, just to kind of give it a little bit more dimension. Okay. This is up and these are all single exposures. This is up in Moundsville Penitentiary up in West Virginia. And all I'm doing is just going zigzag back and forth with the light, which you can tell, you can see the loops I made and all that. So, okay, a little better example of how knowing a little bit of light painting can help you. This is the, I think it used to be called the 59th Street Pier in up near Cape May. I'm trying to think, was that Ocean City, New Jersey, or Avalon? I forget the name of the little town, but it was 59th Street Pier. And the last hurricane that came through, I think, took down all but about 6 of those piers. So I don't know if the remaining 6 are still up or not. But anyway, hour before sunrise, it's cloudy. Well, I had a really big, powerful light, and I just threw some light out on those sticks just so they wouldn't be black. I mean, if you look, you can see there's like a little color to them. And so it just kind of gives you a little something that otherwise it would just be kind of silhouetted against all that blue. So, or here at the DuPont Underground, this is down the dark tunnel, where that wall ends is where I was originally set up, and my buddy stuck his lens in the way. In this case, everything from the right, or I'm sorry, the left, say like the first third on the left is light painted. Everything 2/3 to the right. So from the tunnel into the tunnel opening all the way to the right side of the screen, that's existing light. That's the light and shadow that was coming in to the tunnel. However, that wall on the left was just totally dark. And so I just threw a little light on that to balance the exposure. So sometimes it's not about necessarily seeking to create something that's exclusively light painting. It's just using it to kind of help, execute, what you see, what your vision is there, like that pier or like this. So, okay, compositing your shots, it's the technique I prefer to use. If you can do a little bit of masking, layers and masking in Photoshop, if you can do that, this is the way to do it. I think you get better results. You get what you seek, not what you get, So doing the shoot is only half the work. When you do this, you're finishing the work, and it's truly, I think, your vision when you're finished. This is where it all started out. And because nobody, again, I didn't have a mentor for light painting. I wish I had, but, at the time, the photographers that I knew that I was learning from just didn't do this. And so it dawned on me. I'm like, I wonder if I can combine, multiple shots. So I'm at, of all places, Cuyahoga National Park in Ohio, which I'm not recommending to anyone. It's a pretty unexciting place. Anyway, so it dawns on me, can I do multiple shots and put them all together? And so I go out and I do the railroad in the street. Then I go down and do another shot, putting light on the crossing arms and a little light on the sign. And then I wait like 10 minutes for a car to go by and then do the tail lights. And then that was where light painting and everything changed for me, because I was like, okay, I can put together, different things. So jump forward, my first trip to the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. And the first shot is just ambient out the window glow. The next shot is I'm basically lighting the dolls from directly in front of them. So to the right of my camera, I'm just throwing a little light on the dolls. Then the third shot, all the way to the left of the camera, I'm lighting them again. You can see I've got a nice hard shadow behind that doll against the wall. So you know the light's coming like straight at it from camera left, but straight toward the doll. And so then, you know, I get to choose though what I want. And so here's the finished product. And, you know, it doesn't have the harsh shadow behind it. And I don't know, hopefully it's kind of creepy. That was my goal. I'm going to pause here for just a second and just kind of tell you a story. This is where I learned how we all see the world differently. I put this picture in competition when I was in the Manassas Club, and the judge kind of panned it. I mean, I got a they score. They're not like in, out. Their system is they give each image a score. I got a very mediocre score. Nothing to write home about. I was a little disappointed. And then skip forward several months later to the end of the year banquet, and a different judge gave this, you know, an award for one of the top 10 pictures of the club that year. And I'm, you know, and I'll be honest with you. I mean, when I look back, I mean, I was highly flattered then. When I look back, I don't know that it was one of the top 10 pictures, you know, in my opinion. I mean, I think there was a lot of good work that went through that club, and I don't necessarily think this was in the top 10. However, I think it was better than what the first judge did. So that was a really good lesson for me in how we all see this subjectively. So, you know, you may have something you're really excited about, and then you show it to a friend or somebody, and they're like, yeah, whatever. Don't let it get you down. I mean, we all just see the world differently. And, you know, my little public service announcement, follow your passion. You do you, and be excited about what you do. Back to the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. And in this case, I just took a light stick and put it in a drawer, took a picture, put it behind the cabinet on the left, took a picture, moved it further down, took a picture, you know, kind of hit the inside with a flashlight, and then held a flashlight up close to the fluorescent fixture and just kind of moved the light, you know, across the fixture to make it look like the tubes were glowing. And so like 5 or 6 shots later, there's that. The one thing that's missing from this shot is the floor. I didn't think to do anything to light the floor. So anyway, maybe I'll take another run at that this weekend. Back in Moundsville, at the penitentiary in West Virginia, they don't do light painting workshops. They do ghost tours. So I signed up for a ghost tour, and then I went off and did my own thing all by myself while everybody else was hunting for ghosts. But again, so that doorway is constraining me. In other words, I need to light what's on the other side of the doorway, but I can't do it from in front of that scene where it says 2K tier with the, looks like deputy dog there or something. So I'm doing a little bit of light work, light painting behind the camera, off to the right of the camera. Then I had to go in behind that opening to light paint the rail, a little bit of the floor, a little bit of that far wall on the other side of the railing had to be lit. So, you know, being able to trigger the camera remotely was very helpful. Up in, we used to call this the Graffiti Underground. It's actually, I think, referred to as Coal Pier number 19. It's in Philadelphia. I don't know if it's still there. It's been several years since I've been up there, but it was this old coal pier where I guess they would load ships with coal, and this is underneath it. And so again, multiple shots. I'm running through the scene. Of course, you don't see me because I'm moving, and I'm holding the light in front of me. So I'm literally, if you guys can see the little picture of me, I'm moving the light back and forth in an arc as I'm running through the scene. And of course, there had to be a couple takes, and I had to, you know, kind of light the front a little bit, that wall a little bit. You know, so there's several shots that went into this, but don't be afraid of getting in front of the camera where you think, well, you're going to see me. As long as you're moving and hiding that beam of light from the sensor, you're going to be fine. It's when you stay in one place too long, or you stand somewhere where there's you're too close to a reflective surface, then you can get kind of a shadow there. But anyway, yeah, but for the most part, don't be afraid to get in front of the camera, which is kind of contrary to what we're used to as being photographers, is always being behind the camera. A little place at the Lonaconian Silk Mill, it dawned on me after going up there for several years, it's like, hey, Herb, do you care if we come in after dark? No, I don't care. Oh, wow, cool. And of course, within a year or two of him telling me this, he passed away. So those opportunities were limited. Now, this was before he said that. The basement was kind of dark. And so I would take the time sometimes to set up little still life scenes or something like that other one and this one, and shoot in the dark. Can if you can tell, I love old cars. Again, this is down in Southwest Virginia. Somebody told me about a campground down near Danville, that the guy used to have like a car restoration business or something. And he doesn't do anything with it anymore. He's got all these cars sitting around. So, I put a light in each car. So there's 3 shots there. I didn't have 3 different lights. It's always kind of good if you're shooting cars at night to have some type of light. It doesn't have to look like it's possessed necessarily, but if it's totally dark, it's just a black hole that kind of swallows, the viewer. You're looking at, whoa, dark in there. Anyway, so a little light in the interiors can be helpful. And then, so there's 3 shots there. I'm exposing the front from the left. You can see the beam of light on the grass kind of coming in from camera left. Then you can see the beam of light coming in from camera right. So, again, and then that's before I put any light on the car. And I'll tell you again, back then, I wasn't close enough to these cars. I was, light painting them from too far away. I wasn't, these days I'd have a light a foot away from those cars to paint them today. Back then I was probably 10 feet away with a flashlight. Another old car. Again, you can see there's just enough light coming from the interior that it doesn't immediately draw your eye in, but then it's there. It kind of gives a little bit of context. You can see that like the headliner and everything behind the driver's kind of missing and all, but then if you really study the image, you can see the light comes from a couple different directions. I've never been really strict about trying to make it look like all my light's coming from one direction, like, natural light. If you're out shooting the sun, obviously the light's coming from just one direction and during the daylight. But so I've never been real strict about that. This was a great place that doesn't exist anymore, called the Roaring 20s Antique Car Museum. It was a great place to go for many years. And again, it's so dark by the time I was shooting this. The best time to shoot outside is like 20 minutes to an hour after sunset. With this case, it's like 2 hours after sunset, and there's nothing but woods back there. So it ends up being kind of black, and you really don't get any kind of detail. So you don't really know what's back there because you just can't keep going and going and going with the light. So anyway, so planning a shot, it's not as bright as it seems. It's just the camera's exposing for the scene. The sun has already set on an overcast day. And so, I'm like, okay, this is the shot I wanted. And again, this is my first shot. I'm too far away from the truck, but you can see I am lighting up the left side of the truck. The next shot, I'm still pretty far away from the truck. I'm behind the camera, but this is like 8 years ago. I've learned more since then. But I'm again, I'm lighting up the right side. Now I'm putting some light on the front. Now I'm lighting the inside. And then I'm lighting up those trucks in the background. And look where my light source is. Look how far away it is. It's on the complete outside of the frame on the right side, but yeah, I'm throwing that big beam of light there. So again, this is, and then here I'm like throwing some light up on the trees in the background. And this is how it all came together in Photoshop. And It's just basically 5 different exposures, just a tad of pro contrast. You can't throw a lot of contrast on a light painting because it's going to make your brighters bright and your darkers dark. And you go too much contrast, and all of a sudden you go, whoa, that's way too bright, and this area is way too dark. This is a guy outside of Lynchburg. I haven't been down that way in years. I'd really love to know if he's still there, because I'd love to go back and redo this shot. Just, you know, getting in close, working the light close, rather than how I did in this case. You know, everything was, you know, shooting from so far away. But anyway, so there's that. Now, of course, like, and I didn't notice this for years, I've got no definition of anything to the right side of the truck when you're viewing it. It's just a black hole. The dark, it's not totally dark to the right of the truck. There is a little bit of detail there. And then, of course, even though it's not much, you go, oh, yeah, look at those trucks in the background. And you've got the trees in the background. But again, like I said, I've got that black hole basically behind the mirror on the driver's side. So, you know, we all grow, we all learn. And it's just, like I said, at the time, I thought I really had something here. But today, I wouldn't be happy with this. I'd want to reshoot it. So, processing your light painting. Like I said, I just talked about minimal contrast. Sometimes you have to do a little white balance correction, you know. You can use a gray target if you like. However, what I do is I just shoot on auto. I let the camera do it, and then I work it via eye when I'm processing the pictures in camera raw. And there are times where I'm using the same light on shot A as I'm using on shot B, and I can see the white balance is just totally different, because I guess the direction of light, the camera just made a judgment and it made it wrong. And so you do have to, you know, whereas if you're blocking it in at, say, daylight or something, you know, you should have consistent white balance throughout. And another little trick, if you've got the Nick collection, infrared pictures and light paintings look great with just a little bit of Nick glamour glow added to it. Okay, so you can light paint the landscape. You don't have to just do old rusty cars like I like doing. Okay, no magic formula really. It's just you start about 20 minutes after sunset. The thing to remember is light is cumulative. The longer you light something, the brighter that's going to be. The closer your light is to the subject, the brighter that's going to be. You know, light falls off with distance. A good starting point is about 3 stops underexposed. And then you have, you know, and then you just adapt. Is that too much? Not enough? Do you need to bring your light closer? You know, there's just a lot. You just have to work through the problems. And if you've got a fair amount of experience, you should just be able to do that intuitively, and not have to really sit there and, you know, and wrestle with it. And pre-visualization is very helpful. You got to know what you expect or what you hope for it to look like. All right, little campsite that I stayed in several years ago. I thought, you know, I didn't know if you could light what it would look like. This is one of my first light paintings at night, especially with water. You know, just didn't know what it would look like. Well, it looks fine. You can light paint, you know, water. Here's Blackwater Falls. It's actually raining. You can see in the top right-hand corner, you can see the streaks of rain coming through. Today, I am far too lazy of a photographer to go out there in the rain and try to do that. But, you know, it was like a proof of concept. It was like, hey, will this work? You know, can you do this? Yeah, sure enough, you can. So anyway, this was one of the first meetups we did at RRPT. It was White Oak Canyon, and we did some light, you know, I thought, well, let me see, you know, and so I had somebody else actuating the shutter while I'm running around like a madman, like trying to light paint the different parts of the composition. So you certainly can light paint the landscape. My lesson about light falls off with distance, the light down these rails looks fairly consistent as it goes down. So what I did, I had a light that had 3 different power levels. So when I would start down the rail, I'd get about 1/3 of the way down, and I'd go from low power to medium power, get about another 1/3 of the way, and go from medium power to high power, because I'm going further away from the camera. And then I would also slow down a little bit. I wouldn't run down the rail quite as fast. So this is back at Cuyahoga National Park. the so anyway, but that was just, you know, knowing that light falls off with distance. It was a you know, kind of a good way to work through that. And believe it or not, I did this shot for your club years ago. First time I was asked to present at LPC and on this very subject. And it felt like I didn't have enough body of work. So I knew where this old dilapidated church was just outside of Charlestown, West Virginia. And so I went up and shot that. And it was probably the most complex thing I had ever done by that time. And it, you know, it's kind of a mess. You know, I mean, it's a lot going on there, but, you know, I lit inside the church, outside the church, the weeds in the front, the trees in the back. And if you look, I even had some beautiful color that evening, but it just, it was a gorgeous sunset. I wish I was standing somewhere a little more appropriate for a sunset that evening, but did lend some nice color there. Something a bit simpler. This is up at Big Meadows. It took a while to shoot this. I had, you know, these big lights that are the sealed lead acid battery lights, you know, like 1,000,000 candle power. I went through 3 of those just running around the field and the trees, because, you know, I'm up under the tree practically light painting. I'm not light painting those trees from behind the camera. I'm up in the scene trying to get all the branches and the tree trunks and the rocks and everything. And so it's a lot of running around. And like I said, I went through 3 of those lights because, you know, just they run for, you know, 5 or 10 minutes or something. And this is just, you know, those are good sized trees. So this is a, you know, quite a big area to cover. You know, an old bridge, an old covered bridge up in West Virginia. My dog and my wife were with me when I did this. They were both kind of creeped out being out there at night. So finally I had to go, you guys got to go wait in the truck. But, you know, the thing that kind of really makes this is that the clouds moving in front of the moon. I think that kind of, you know, without that, I just think this image would be lacking. The other thing is, I think I'd need more detail in the right lower corner. You know, it's kind of neat to go back and look at your work from several years ago. And, you know, if you're, you know, honest with yourself, I think you'll find, you know, hopefully a lot of shortfalls, and hopefully that you've grown as a photographer in the intervening years, and that, you know, so anyway, they don't make this anymore, but it was a hell of a flashlight. You know, you could pop in gels, you could buy interchangeable batteries. This is out in the Palouse, and the battery in that thing was dying. It wasn't holding a charge. So basically, I lit the little stuff here in the foreground behind. And if you notice, the wind's blowing a bit, so you can see there's some movement. But the debris in the front, I lit the inside of the building, and then everything else is just car headlights kind of pointing at it because the battery wasn't holding a charge. So, you know, it's just improvising. What do you have? What can you do? Anyway, so the progression of time, you know, so this one shot here is 20 minutes from the first shot to the last. I took 25 shots total, and I used 5. So you can see I've got the blue hour. It's like the tail end of the blue hour. And then by the end, there's nothing, you know, there's nothing left in the sky. But, you know, that's to try to get all that in one shot be kind of difficult. So that's, and I'm just more comfortable taking the multi-shot approach to this stuff. The Harold Ross diffusers, you know, you can make these yourself. Harold sells them on his Etsy site, and or if you Google Harold Ross photography, you can find the link to it. And he does a really nice job. I mean, they're painted on the inside. If you make your own, you want to paint them white on the inside, and you want to make sure they're flat black on the outside. Otherwise, they become translucent when light goes through them. But the really cool thing about these diffusers is they give you an incredibly soft quality of light. This is the remote room at the asylum, and hey, by the way, not everybody's muted. Hang on a second. Got a lot of noise coming through here. I don't know if I can do this, Sam, or if you can, but
I think you have the power. I can't do it.
Yeah, I hate to do this, but it was getting really distracting
Yeah.
to participants. Invite. I'm sorry, guys.
I think it worked. I think you got it to work.
Okay. Anyway, all right, awesome. Okay, apologies for that. Okay, so anyway, this is that Harold Ross little diffuser, and you can see it's a fairly big scene. This is one of the rooms of the asylum, and so I'm still light painting a very large area, so to speak, considering the small flashlight, and I'm holding the light inches away from the subject, but yet, you know, there's a lot there. Now, I'll tell you the thing you have to be careful of is there's a little glass case or plastic case in the window. And if you look at the windowsill, you can see like there's some errant streaks of light reflected on that plastic case. And so, you know, that's like, oops, that's an oops, that wasn't intentional. But it's just, you know, something to be aware of, you know, when you're out doing your thing. Oh man. Okay. All right. Little clown there. I'll bring a clown or two with me in case anybody wants to play with toys. Up at the silk mill, again, it's a little scene and just light painted using those little diffusers. A sewing machine they had at the asylum for a few years. I think they took the rug out of this, so I don't think that's like that anymore. But again, I'm using those little elbowed diffusers to do that. And again, it's maybe a dozen different pictures put together to make that. LED panels. I think LED panels are awesome for light painting. You don't need a very big one, just a little small one. And I use it on a monopod. I just attach it to a monopod, and all I'm doing here is I'm just holding it still. I really should have light painted this rather than just had the light shine down on it, but I was experimenting with different looks. These are those trains at Cape May that I showed you in that Progression of Time series. But turning the power way down on it, little sunflower over at McKee, or running around in Shenandoah. Just again, you know, here, and I'll self-critique my work, the light's too broad. And of course, I didn't want to trample all the ferns, but, you know, ideally I would have wanted to target the light to portions of the tree where you had like a direction. So say the light was coming from one direction, so one part of the trunk tends towards shadow versus the part that's lit. A little more depth behind here would have been helpful. If, you know, if I was going to be really, you know, serious and try to do something like that again, that's where I see the shortfall in this, and I'd want to take another shot out. This is Sarah. She used to come out to our meetups, and anyway, this was, you see the little elbow she has on her flashlight, you know, and so she was out doing some light painting. And then here at the beach in Iceland with that LED. Oh, and by the way, I was using the LED panel just to light her. And if I blow it up really big, she moved a little bit. People are very difficult to light paint, and I'll talk about that just a little more toward the end. Here's just a chunk of ice on the beach in Iceland, and I'm just using a light behind it. It's kind of a neat moment, but not a really particularly interesting shot. But here's the old crashed airplane that's on the beach in Iceland. And I'm just using the monopod. It's midnight. You can see the moon's up. It's not really dark because it's August in Iceland and it doesn't get totally dark. Anyway, I'm just using the monopod as an extension. And think of rolling paint. If you've ever used a paint roller, that was the process for light painting this airplane. Is just walking along the airplane, moving it up and down, okay? Or this old truck out in the Palouse, you know, just, you know, moving the light around the truck. Or this one, this is my favorite one out there. Truck's gone now. That's the one thing about the Palouse. A lot of these old trucks have kind of disappeared. I don't know, I guess somebody's been scooping them up. But, you know, these are all done with that little LED panel, which you know, a little LED panel and a monopod, anybody can fit that in their suitcase when they go to travel. And it's very versatile for doing a little light painting. The ice light, in this case, I'm using it wrong. My technique has evolved here, but it, you know, it's kind of a different kind of light. It's a broad light. You know, it's kind of neat, but everything kind of lit overall, again, because at the time I'm too far away from the truck with it. You know, same thing here, these other cars. Now here's one that I did with the ice light, and there's probably at least 50 different exposures, you know, that put this together. And, you know, for instance, the cars, if you ever want to do, practice on some rusty cars before you do a shiny car, because the shiny cars are really tough because of all the reflections. You know, in this case, you know, it's got a sharp body line after the door, but that body line disappears into the quarter panel. So I've got to have something, because black doesn't really reflect. So I need that light to kind of go down that left quarter panel. So otherwise it's just black and you don't really get the shape very well. So the reflections of light on black help define the shape. The other thing is, you can see like under the door handle, it's darker there. So with cars like this, you use the light horizontally, and then you want the light to hit it but fall off. So you want the shadows where they're supposed to be. And anyway, it's you know, it's a lot of fun doing something like this, but it's also it's not easy. It's not easy. But anyway, okay. Now, if you like toys, this thing's made by a company called Proto Machines. This thing will produce any color light in the rainbow. You control hue, saturation, brightness, everything. And it's a pretty cool toy. And I used it to do this. You've got the different color light. This is at the asylum. This was something that they were working on. They never ended up using it, which I kind of understand, but it was the concept that, you know, the owner's son, who does the haunted house, wanted to experiment with. But, you know, I've got the white light on the ceiling. I've got the warmer light on the haunted scary baby. And then the blocks were all, you know, a little bit warmer light. And then the green light, which is spookier than red, it all came from that one light, and it lasts a long time, so you don't have to worry about running out of juice or anything. Okay, I was talking about light painting people. This is Megan, and if I really blew this up, I didn't ask her to hold her breath, and that was a mistake, because her chest is actually a little bit blurry because of just that motion of breathing, you know, that movement. She's laying on the floor. It's incredible. You need, and my camera's basically on a C-stand suspended over top of her. And you're trying to move the light around, and you're trying to have the model not move. Sam, if you want to go for this, go for it, but it's tough. I'll just say that. Yeah, I did it once, and I'm not sure I want to do it again. It's incredibly hard to get people to hold perfectly still when it's a period of 5 or 10 seconds. Heaven forbid you're trying to do multiple shots or whatever. Really tough. And then of course you don't need fancy equipment. I did this with an iPhone and a Streamlight stylus, which is it's barely bigger than a pen. And you just pointed it down in the bottle, and there used to be an app for the iPhone. I think it was called bracket mode or something. It would do one underexposed, one overexposed shot. Well, this is underexposed by, you know, so everything was a little dark. And so, you know, but it's kind of a neat shot, and didn't need any fancy camera equipment to pull it off. So anyway, if you don't have anything to do this Saturday, I'm doing a light painting workshop at the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum from like 6:30 p.m. till 1 a.m. And It's a lot of fun. So much fun that Sam's coming back for like, I don't know, the third time or something.
Yeah, it's our third time.
What's that?
Yeah, it's our third time, I think.
Third time, I know. So, and then the other one that is a lot of fun. It's a little bit more travel. It's Old Car City. I'm doing on November 12th. It's a Friday in Georgia, and it's an incredible junkyard. So anyway, like here's some shots from Old Car City, that an old ambulance, or these old cars. It's $300 for the workshop down there. It covers day and evening admission, and we'll probably do a Zoom session beforehand. And anyway, and then here's some other shots from the asylum. And I shot this a couple years ago. I don't even know where these things are now. I don't know if they're still there or not. I haven't seen them in a couple of years, all these suitcases, but it's a big place. You almost get lost. But something simple, just some old clothes on a hanger, and or last year I was just, kind of walking around shooting laundry tubs. So anyway, lots of fun. And anyway, cool. Thanks for inviting me. Any questions?
Lots of great comments in the chat, but major
okay.
questions. Let me see if there was anything. But people can come off mute, and if you have a question.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. How do I put you back in charge, Sam?
Hit the three dots on my
Yeah.
picture.
Here we go.
And then make host or something like that.
That's what I'm looking for. Actually, I think I have to find you, and then
yeah.
Yeah. Here we go. Let's see. More. Make host.
Yay.
Right, there you go.
Cool. All right. So I'm just scrolling through. I don't. We went ahead and put the link to the Dennis Smith ball of light for you.
Cool.
So if you want that. And everyone else just had cool comments, like they just liked it.
Oh, thanks.
So,
Sam, can I ask a question?
sure.
Hey, Don, this is
Hey.
Chiwu. Really, thank you very much for this wonderful presentation.
Oh, you're welcome.
I was just want to have one question here about when you shoot the rusty cars there,
Mhm.
how do you actually apply for permit? I mean,
You have to know
I see signs posted on the trees that's posted, which means no trespassing.
I do not. I mean, I won't sit there and tell you that I've never been to a place where, there've certainly been places without permission. However, I've never light painted anything without permission from the owner to be there. So, it's definitely everything you guys saw here as far as light painting goes. It was all with permission of the property owner.
Great, thank you very much.
Oh, sure. I'm a big advocate that there's some places where if you know the people that maybe it's like there's some towns, for instance, because I like shooting abandoned stuff. And there's some places that have a reputation, for instance, that the police, maybe patrol it or whatever, or if you're found there, you're going to get arrested. I try to stay away from those places. There's other towns that, maybe have an abandoned factory or whatever, and it's just kind of well known through the urban X community that, that nobody cares if you go there. So, that's kind of how I approach it. If it seems fairly safe, I'll consider it. But I am way too old to run from the police. So that's my take on that.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
we just had Cindy Vasco, and she was talking about those types of situations and to always just be very cautious and
Yeah.
the right thing, right?
Yeah. Cindy's been to a lot of places.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. If there's any other questions, speak up. Anybody? Nope. All right.
All right.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
everybody.
And I can't wait till this weekend. I'm excited.
Cool.
All right.
All right. Good
Oh,
night, everybody.
I'll also post your meetup in our thing. I'm sure a lot of people are already in it, but just in case.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Good night, everybody.
Good time.
Good night.
Bye.